everybody. David Donaldson here with another episode of Entrepreneurial Impact, joined by my associate, Joe Martin. And today we have an esteemed author, investor, Culin Tate. Culin, also known as the host coach. For those of you watching at home, here's a copy of his book. I had the ability to hear him present on this topic of wealth building and financial freedom through real estate at a recent event, one of our KW regional events. And I was intrigued, right? I had previously been an investor, kind of liquidated some stuff over time and kind of been tipping my toe about get back in. And your focus in short term and Airbnbs, I thought really struck a chord because a lot of the coaching, a lot of the conversation we're having with business owners that are in real estate right now is financial freedom through wealth. And what a better topic of conversation is investing with what you know, and that is real estate. So welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Why, before we kind of jump in, let's give us a little bit of a background about you. And, because I know real estate was not your background prior to this. So why don't you kind of share like where you came from and how you ended up as an investor?
Yeah, I've always been I refer to myself as a serial entrepreneur. I was really in the tech space, did some electronics manufacturing in the early part of my career, and then got into some software, web-based type technologies. In 2018, the startup that I was working for sold. And so I was unemployed and at a crossroads. 48 years old, looking at, what's my next thing? As a young kid, and I'm going to spin up some new startup and work 80 hours a week. And I had a cabin in the Shenandoah Valley that was on Airbnb, and I saw the numbers were pretty good. They're very strong, and did some research and realized that I could scale that. Uh, Ended up in 2018, ended up picking up three sort of by happen chance. Didn't really set out to buy three, all at once, but the deals just kind of came that way. Two were off market, and really those three properties set me on the path for financial freedom. I had made good money in different endeavors, but never had that financial freedom part, right? The freedom to get up and leave the desk, go to the soccer game. I always had anxiety, just taking a lunch break, right? Run up to the bank in the middle of the afternoon. I always just felt that like gravity to my office chair that I've sort of been freed from through this phase of my life as a short-term rental investor.
I love the term. You kind of hit two terms that I love: serial entrepreneur, right, and financial freedom, because I think that's a concept that a lot of people hear and they say, "Hey, that sounds like me," but defining it is challenging. So when I look at financial freedom, I talk to a lot of people and I say, "Hey, what does that look like for you?" A lot of times they're business owners and they have investments, but they're not really capitalizing on that. To me, when I look at financial freedom, it's the ability to have money coming in, whether I'm actually working today or not. Right? Am I
Exactly.
striking the clock?
Yes, exactly. That's exactly how I feel about it. Making money where you sleep, or that being able to just kind of pick up and go, take an afternoon off, or hit that 3 o'clock soccer game, on Tuesday afternoon.
Soccer, hockey, whatever strikes your fashion, right, Joe?
Sure.
I'm more of a fan of the American-based sports than the Russian-based ones. My friends and I call soccer and hockey a communist sport, but hey, no harm, no foul on that one.
You do realize hockey was started in Canada, right?
Frozen lakes, communism. No, it's fine. I'm just joking around. No, I think it's hilarious. I think the question that I only have on the Airbnb, like for you, Cullen, what was the passion behind doing like short-term rentals through like Airbnb? I guess that's my question around like I've got long-term rentals, I got commercial rentals. I've never done the short-term rentals just because of I don't actually want to be dealing with project management all that much, and I want to give it to somebody else to handle. But like, what was it about short-term rentals, like given your journey to like, hey, startup, I got to do something new. Why that niche?
I think the passion for me came from being able to really control on a day-to-day basis how the asset's performing. So, I've had the same kind of journey. I've had some long-term rentals, I've had some commercial buildings, but that you lock in a lease, right? There's not much you can do to drive value, on a day-to-day basis. And so for me, the exciting thing when I started to really get good at and using some of the tools that are available to really drive revenue and drive the product, improve the guest experience on a day-to-day basis, and see that guest experience improvement turn into a higher revenues. So, I had this first cabin and I thought it was doing pretty good and it was doing maybe like $4,000 a month. I really honed my craft over that summer and started using some dynamic pricing tools and some automations, and turned that $4,000 a month cabin into a $6,000 a month cabin that now is probably more like a $7,000 or $8,000 a month cabin. So the passion for me just kind of came from the input and result, that feedback loop. And then additionally, helping other people do it, right? So, testing my systems and processes, in other markets. It kind of started with friends. People noticed, hey, you're doing pretty good with this. You think you could help me, and seeing that it was replicable, and then getting involved with Keller Williams and agents all around the country. We've been able to repeat the process, just about every market you could think of. That's what gets me excited.
Can I ask this might be really dumb because I really haven't gone into like Airbnb and like how you do those like value add. If you have a consistent short-term rental, like I'm assuming you've got, and you do the value adds with like either fixtures you're adding into it or other items that cause a better value, do these short-term rentals eventually trade like a commercial building where like you can take like non-occupancy, non like fixtures and stuff like that, immediately come in and get like this how much demand for the rentals are. This is like my year over year rental from Airbnb, and they actually trade at a higher valuation when you go to sell them, or are they very much like a normal residential property based on comps if you were to like sell that to a new buyer or seller?
Yeah, it's a little bit of a hybrid, and it's evolving, particularly with the like DSCR loans. It's starting to trade a little bit more like a commercial property. I have not actually divested or sold any of my properties. So, I will definitely command a higher value, and you do see it, in when you're looking at properties, you'll sometimes see in the listings, this is a successful short-term rental. It's, being sold for fully furnished. It's got a calendar, $50,000-$60,000 a year. So I think that is getting some premium, but I wouldn't say that we're at the point where, like a commercial apartment building where you can really, get, a full appreciation of the rent rolls.
Now
But I see it
you
going
had
that way.
touched on what's that?
I do see it going that direction, right? And the other thing that's going on is we're seeing larger players come into the short-term rental space and trying to buy up portfolios. And so I think those will definitely trade at a premium.
You touched on early when you got your stock through your first cabin that it was kind of by happenstance. I think that happens for a lot of people a lot of times. Like, hey, I held on to this property or became an investor, or hey, I bet this business because it was interesting to trade. But now you're being purposeful about it, right? How to associates who know inventory, know the market, know they're experts of where they are, how do they get started? And because I think that the mindset for a lot of people, and forgive me if I'm wrong, is like, hey, it's a beachfront property, it's a lakefront property, it's a waterfront property, which always are areas of high demand, so the values are really high. How do I get into this and say, hey, how do I find a property that's going to be productive, right, and provide value for me that I'm not just betting on appreciation?
Mm-hmm. So I look at it, my thesis is really also change of use on the property. So at the beach, definitely things are going to be, the price, the valuation is going to be baked in there with the assumption that there's some rental going on. So in my markets, and the getaway markets that I invest in and coach in primarily, you're changing the use usually at this point, from the single family getaway weekend house to a full term, short-term rental Airbnb. So that's where there's some arbitrage still available, is that change of use from the weekend getaway house to the full-time commercial rental, short-term rental.
So you're focused on identifying the properties that can be more of that all year, all time use, just as that
Yeah, definitely
versus
year
the
round.
vacation getaway.
Well, it's really versus the beach. The only places, and I'm sure there, you know,
Everything but the
um,
beach.
well, and it depends on your goals, right? So if your goal, and I've definitely had clients like this, my goal is to always own a beach home, and but I'd sure like it to pay for itself, right? Then everything that I teach works, right? But if your goal is maximizing cash flow or return on investment, then the price per square foot, at the beach, there's some rent usually baked into that.
I mean, oh, God, Joe.
No, I think this is like a fascinating one for everybody thinking about like the different ways to leverage real estate. What are like, besides just the general like cash flow of like, hey, I got into Airbnb and as long as the mortgage is $3,000 and I get 3,500, I'm pretty much good to go. That it does what you're talking about. Is like it pays for itself. I get some time for it myself, and it's obviously a debt pay down and appreciation. Are there any other benefits inside of like the Airbnb for those listening that haven't dabbled in it besides like obviously getting the mortgage paid and some tax incentives from like it being a business? Like what other tax incentives or benefits are you seeing outside the normal cash flow or ROI that's like important to you?
Well, to me, cash flow is the most important part to me. And so not investing in the beach and investing in places that are getaway destinations where we're repurposing the asset, we're doing much better than just paying the mortgage. So, a typical property, let's say $6,000 a month in gross is going to net something like $3,000, right? After mortgage, after cleaning, after utilities. And
Mm-hmm.
so if you take that number, and that's kind of where I was at with my first, it's pretty easy to start multiplying that $3,000 number times however many you need to meet your fixed expenses, and that's where we start to get into the financial freedom, right? So it was pretty quick that 2-3 units was really paying all of my fixed costs to live.
Mm-hmm.
I
And
mean,
then
the
from there we just
margins
sort of
there are
scale.
dramatically higher than what we talk about when we're talking about long-term investment type of opportunities, right? Your margins are at par, maybe a little bit of, and for a lot of people, depending on the market, they're running in the red because they're banking on that appreciation. You're actually seeing profitability, 20, 30, 40, 50%, 100% if you're making 6,000 on 3,000, right? Then what I think most people realize, wow, this is different.
It is. It's very different. And, kind of back to the theme of your podcast, the part of the difference is that you are now running a business, right? It's not just set it and forget it. And to me, that's fun, right? So, to have a long-term rental where you've got a guest in there, a leasee in there, and then you only come back once a year to repaint. We're running more of a business in the short-term rental portfolio, right? We're always improving. We're managing contractors. We're managing cleaners. We're managing guests. But that's where the value, comes in as well, right? You're creating that value by creating that guest experience, and so it is more like running a small business than even with one, right? So in our case, we have 10, so it's a full-fledged business.
You have 10. And now, so at one point in time, I had eight. I had eight rental properties. And the last thing, I didn't manage any of them. And now, that capacity, I only had one that was a short term rental. And that was before Airbnb, right? Was a thing, right? So I had basically a property management company that just managed the 3 day turnover, which was, the minimums what we were allowed to get away with in that particular location. Do you see more and more people doing self-manage or outsourcing that management because the margins are there to cover it, right?
Right. It depends on the person's situation, right? But I preach self-management, right? So Airbnb does so much for us, right? They show the listing, they collect the money, they, insure it, they give a platform for communications, and then we use softwares to automate pricing, we use softwares to automate messaging. So the tools are there to make it very easy to self-manage. Additionally, so not only do you duck, say, the 20% management fee, we always talk about the other part where people miss is a management company isn't really incentivized to maximize your revenue, right? They're just, they want to get your calendar full for you. So, when you learn what you're doing in the short-term rental game, you are really also maximizing your revenue. So it's not just the 20% you lose; it's the 20%, the additional 20% that you would have gained by doing more active management on your own versus what a management company is going to do for you.
Culin, sorry, I haven't read the book. I also wasn't there for your breakout when we had that in our Virginia's Regions event. I got a question. Like when I look at my rental properties, it's kind of like within a 50-mile radius in my area that is also on the in a I know this isn't short term. This is like long term residential. It's on the neighborhoods on the other side of Perception. Like for instance, in Northern Virginia, there's this area of like Southern Arlington that doesn't make a whole lot of sense south of 50. It's like north of 50. Everybody wants to be there. You get into Old Town, but there's this like pizza slice area of South Arlington that nobody wants to be in, but it like bookends. It doesn't make any sense where there's like substantial price points and rentals higher on the east side. So I've always said, like, how do you get to bookend neighborhoods? How do you be within 50, 50 miles of your primary residence to do exactly what you're talking about, like, being the primary manager of the property? And then I always look at the 1% rule, or I look at the fact of like, how can I make sure that I'm getting at least, a 12% cash on cash for that rental property? Is there any like key metrics that you're looking at when you say like, back of envelope napkin or something like that says this is kind of like the parameters that you're going off of to even consider the short-term rental being valuable for you?
There's some great tools available. There's a tool called AirDNA that you can use. Let's say you're thinking about a market and you want to try to get some insight. AirDNA, you can go to that market and you can get average daily rates. You can get average occupancy, some other statistics about investability. I don't look at any specific number just because I know my market so well. I know what a house in that market, is going to generate, and I, can then just look at the mortgage costs. In the book, I think it's like page 28 or something. There's a whole P&L that kind of shows you, from gross to all estimating all your expenses. And I do, the one number I do strive for is that 50% gross margin from, gross to net. So.
Gotcha. The only other question I've got, I know that's come up with a couple of my buddies they've got grandfathered in on like the short-term rental. I don't know what you call it. Basically, they're no longer allowing permits, or they're forcing permits in. Is there anything that people should be aware of in regards to their? I guess they could do, investigate and go read, because knowledge is power. But anything that you're seeing as far as like trends of different areas starting to put parameters on what kind of short-term rentals you can have. And I know this actually comes up a lot because we're so close to Washington, D.C., with the major hotels lobbying very heavily for short-term rental constraints and like limits and permits and stuff like that. I don't know if you've got insights or ways to kind of look at that, or how you're seeing that as an opportunity rather than just a restriction.
Yeah, on the big picture is to look in markets that historically have been getaway destinations, right? Yeah. So they're typically not going to change, right? There may be some permitting. And then from a kind of more micro perspective, you always need to check, the county that you're, check with the county and see what the regulations are. I'd rather be taxed than, regulated out. The other thing to do is check your HOA. So you can be in a county that allows short-term rentals, but there's some HOA restrictions. So just check with your agent, or be the agent that knows, what the HOA covenants may be regarding short-term rentals.
Beware the HOA.
No, it's helpful because I think I know these are all the questions that I always get fielded about. That's why I'm asking you these, Colin. So sorry if they're like, level one experience on it, but it's always the ones that I always get is like, how does it trade against a commercial property? What are some general ideas that you kind of look at for targeting? And then like, what are some of the restrictions with legislation that are coming down the pipe that might have some challenges, and how to like reposition some of these properties
that tool
or
that I mentioned.
Terms.
Yeah, that tool that I mentioned, AirDNA, does have a quick. There's really like 5 things that go into a market grade, and one is regulation, right? So what is the regulatory environment? And it's scaled on like 0 to 100, right? So 100 actually being good. So if you are looking at an area and you see, kind of a regulation score in the middle, something less than 100, 50, 60, then you're going to want to, that's a yellow flag to dig a little deeper.
Gotcha.
I look at this and you hear different things, like just like the real estate market, the micro niches, you hear different things, good and bad. Like you hear like, hey, I've missed the boat on the whole Airbnb mindset, or like, let's dispel that for a couple of minutes, okay? And let's kind of talk about that, like real estate in general. Today's good as day as anybody else to get started, because what you touched on, which was know my market, right? So you don't just jump in blindly to things, but we also don't just take what we learn from the news either.
Right.
So
What was
let's
the question
talk
again?
about some of the negative connotations that might have been out there.
I think anything that we've heard recently comes out of people who got started in the short-term rental business sort of haphazardly. They kind of jumped on the boat, during the COVID boom and did real well, and now aren't doing as well. Those are the people that aren't really treating hosting like a profession, like a business. Um, you know, Things were easy. Now Airbnb doesn't like me anymore, right? So, if you take the time to educate yourself, yeah, if you take your time to educate yourself on, Airbnb at its core is a search algorithm, right? Like Google. And it's incentivized to, so it has to make some sort of decision. Just understanding this will separate hosts, the professional. This is the kind of the core of a professional versus, say, haphazard host, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you understand that, you're marketing to an algorithm, right? You're marketing to guests, inevitably, but you're really marketing. Airbnb has to decide in which order to show the 300 listings in a given market. And the crux of that is thinking of that showing, that free showing, that placement as like a lead. And so if you are the host that has the property and the pricing and the policies and the reviews, have treated this professionally, then you are going to climb that algorithm and you're going to show at the top. Right. So you want to be a prominent priority host. You want to be on page one. And so what happens is people who don't understand that end up on page 4 of search results, in the number 89 position. And then they don't get views, and views means then they don't get bookings. So you got to learn, the algorithm. We need to understand what the algorithm wants, right? And that is, a unique property with great reviews, great photography, good decor, and priced appropriately for the moment, right? So, for example,
Boy, that
I
sounds a
have a
whole
couple.
lot different than what we tell our consumers when they're selling their house.
Yeah, you got to meet the market. It's worth, next Tuesday night at one of my properties might be, $120 a night, because it's next Tuesday night and there's just not that many people looking next Tuesday night versus, 2 weekends from now, or Thanksgiving weekend. Let's use that example, right? Where that same property is going to book for $350 a night.
So what I'm hearing you really say, as you're saying this, I've done a lot of this is like me going off down a rabbit hole, Culin. So please pardon this one, but what I just heard you say was essentially we always call it, like, a couple of my buddies talk about the Marriott model, where like Marriott really doesn't own anything or do anything. They just have a platform. They just have a login that says, hey, or here's all the Marriott properties that are on Bonvoy. Here's the pricing. Here's the features. And what you're telling me is to be really successful in short-term rental is hey, you're partnering with Airbnb as the platform for search, but it's on me as the property, because if anyone knows about hotel management, you got the person that buys the building, you got the person that operates the hotel, and then you've got Bonvoy that basically operates the booking and search function. So what you're saying is you're basically kind of like a mini hotel connoisseur, and you're saying hey, if I know that my property looks like this and gets pictures like this and blah, 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 I can demand this rate. So you're really, and you think about hotel booking or short-term booking, there's a cost of money that goes to Airbnb, and you're saying where the majority of the money is going to come from is the ability to have, to operate the property, kind of like if you're operating the building, and then to actually own the property as well, because that's where your money's being made. That's kind of my short-term, thing of how you could actually operate an amazing business where you've got the $3,000 margin per property.
Absolutely. We think of ourselves as a boutique hotel brand.
Yeah. And you're making all that money off of the appreciation of the property, which I still think is my biggest takeaway on this one, Culin, is just the fact that short-term rentals are starting to get looked at because of DSCR loans as a portfolio for commercial properties. Because if you could show all that rental income and all of the asset appreciation on it. You could package it and sell it to a portfolio and really have an exit play, which is really cool because I don't know, if you acquire 15 individual properties, there's not a whole lot of demand to say, hey, let me package all 15 residential properties and try to sell it as a portfolio to some like BlackRock. But I could see the rental part being really advantageous in areas that have grandfathered in short-term rental laws.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that see that that's the direction things are heading, right? Private equity came in and bought a lot of, residential houses. And they're always, private equity is always looking for margin. And so there's, a lot of thought from people who understand that, that short-term rentals will get sold. I actually have a client that's raised two different separate funds. They bought like 20 houses in the first fund. I think they're buying like 100 in the second fund with that exact exit strategy in mind.
So I'm not that dumb. There's a reason why you keep me around, Dave. I have my moments of like enlightenment.
I learned somewhere that you just surround yourself with others smarter than you, and you figure things out, and you just raise expectations. So that works out well for me.
So, Culin, I got my final question on my end. I'll shut up and give it over to Dave. Is there anything that we didn't cover in this conversation that you think is like paramount to anybody getting into short-term rentals with like Airbnbs?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, but let's just take a step back on, where to get started. So, maybe a capstone here is people are excited, they've heard about these numbers, they've been interested in this. What's their next step? And to me, I always say, find your where, right? Finding your where is, where do you personally, Joe, what do you like to do? Are you into skiing? Are you into mountain biking, craft beer, going to the lake, going to the river? Where is a place that you would enjoy spending some time? Where are you passionate about? A couple hours? Where do you like to get away for a weekend? And that's where I tell people to get started. Where would you like to get away? And because that money follows the energy, right? If you're going to go set this place up and be excited about it, it should be a place that you are personally passionate about. So for the listeners, thinking about this, that maybe that's your homework, sit down with your spouse or friend or colleague and brainstorm, where do I like to go? What do I like to do? Do I like to go to the mountains? It started for me from fly fishing, right? I like to fly fish and ended up in this cabin area and ended up buying a cabin well before Airbnb. And it was, because I liked that area. So people can get started by brainstorming a list of places that they would be interested in staying, and then pop over to AirDNA. It's now free. You used to have to sign up for the market and take a look at that market and see, what's the score on that market? Does that look like there's other Airbnbs that are successful there? And look at their daily rates, and then, get out and go see one. Take the weekend and go see an agent and get out there and, walk the sidewalks.
Yeah, I tell you what, I mean, I've been in real estate for 17 years, and I always felt that wherever I lived, I knew the market pretty well from an investment side of things to understanding the long-term investment, right? So this is really because our audience predominantly, for the most part, is going to be real estate agents, and I'm saying, not only do you know your market, but do you know this section of the market, right? Are you able to talk to this side of the market to, one, not only take advantage of it and build your own personal wealth, but two, work with others to help them identify the right properties. Like, I literally just jumped right on AirDNA, and I'm like, boy, it'd be really cool if it told me what houses were for sale in certain markets. Truth be told, here's 532 properties that are for sale, that I didn't know was there, and that's shame on me for not knowing that this vehicle was an avenue to go, hey, look, it's not only telling me values of property, occupancy of property, average rates, but it's saying here's properties for sale.
Yeah, and as an agent, this is, I get excited about, talking to real estate agents. It's the focus of my coaching. Okay, let's say you're not quite ready to go buy an investment property, but how many clients have you sold a primary home to, right? Go back to your database. How many homes have you sold in the last 5-10 years, right? And who doesn't want to own a vacation rental property? You can go back, you can have a seminar, right? You could get a little, weekend thing together, open house type thing, or just individually reach out to your clients. Yeah. That every one of those people is a potential buyer for a short-term rental if you could show them how it's going to pay for itself and most likely pay for that person's primary mortgage. That is a powerful tool for an agent.
I could have said it better. Look, as we wrap up, let me ask you this, because I think it's great that you said that, self-manage is the way to go, and you get to minimize the expense and the cost, because the tools, right? I know when I bought my property, goodness gracious, it was almost 20 years ago now. It was in Sedona, which was a luxury market, which was difficult to crack in because of 30-day limitation rules, which we kind of taptoed around. But I had to have somebody on the ground manage it for me, which was fine. But now, if I'm able to reduce that overhead and manage myself, how does somebody like you help me? Right, this is your niche now, right? You've identified, you've written a book, you're now coaching people, you're the host coach. So what are you doing to help people take advantage and capitalize and learn and grow through this avenue of investment?
Yeah, the cool thing about the book is most books on short-term rentals, I refer, and not everyone, but most are sort of book reports on the platform, right? This is the feature of the platform. This is another feature of the platform, or let's compare two different softwares. Our book was written, the byline is Blueprint for Financial Freedom. It is 100% actually what we do. It is the process we follow for finding markets, evaluating markets, decorating, it's all in there, right? Decorating, all the tools. So, and the book is on Kindle for 99 cents. It's $14.90 on paperback. We're there. We're really just trying to spread the word and help agents. I do free consultations. Hostcoach.co is the website. Anybody can pop over there and schedule a Calendly with me. And then if that's not quite enough, then I do, like a 90-day coaching engagement where I will work with you specifically, David. All right, I get all this, but I need some accountability. I need somebody to walk me through specifically, my market, my property. I help people pick and select properties, come up with their decor and renovation plans together, and then help them, actually go live on the platform and plug in all these softwares.
I'll ask you one last question, and then we'll kind of call it in. I really appreciate your time. This was great. And, who knows, maybe I'll start buying properties again in a year from now. We'll kind of relook at some of the successes. So if we mentioned we put the beach in its own separate environment, and we recognize that you love the lakes and the cabins, through your coaching and working with your clients, is there any one particular area you say, hey, if I'm going to look at a new market that maybe it's outside of where I currently live, is there one that jumps off for you?
There's not. It's the one that's, 1 to 3 hours from whatever your major metropolitan area is, wherever you live. You want to be a couple hours away. And where do people, where do people in your town, where do they go?
Go where they go.
We met in Charlottesville, and I think I said it to Maria. What a better place! I mean, Charlottesville. You could draw 2-3 hour ring around Charlottesville, and boy, you can find just about everything from lakes to rivers to mountains to skiing. It's just using that as an example of where we met. There's dozens and dozens of potential areas.
Well, listen, Culin, I really appreciate you joining today. I found you incredibly insightful and in that room, and I always have to hear things a couple of times, so I really appreciate you coming back and joining us again and just kind of drilling it home for me a second time. I'm going to take another dive back into your book, and I can already tell that Joe's been online looking because he loses his focus and his eyes go to his screen. So I know.
I think it's funny, Culin, that you literally, as you were doing that, I found this property in a riverfront area on the Potomac that I was already looking at, and I was pulling up AirDNA, and I'm looking at the property on my MLS. So I'm like, but yes, you did. Your content today got me thinking on something else. I already reached out to my realtor down in that area to be like, hey, can you run some comps for me? So there it is. You had value.
Joe's busy writing a listing offer.
Like as you're saying this and you're giving me all like the deal, like I'm thinking to myself, this is really dumb. I really do need to move forward on this thing. So I already started moving on it. So you impacted somebody.
That's what I realize when I look at, and I think there's a scarcity of mindset for agents. Like we have all this information. We've got tools, we've got properties, we have analytics right through our local boards and the MLSs. We've got search capabilities branded to ourselves that we send to our consumers all at the same time. But we as realtors don't do enough for ourselves. And that's really what I want to kind of generate for people. Because the traditional aspect of buying a property for the long term is still a solid play. Getting involved in commercial, heck, I've actually been looking at some storage units myself lately. There are play, but this avenue, this area, the way that we've experienced things, the way we look like, is something we really need to get involved in, and you got to do better at understanding it, if not for yourself, but for your consumers. So with all that, Culin, I appreciate you joining us today.
Hey, can I throw one more thing in there? We talked about it
at the beginning. Absolutely.
So it's that scarcity comes from just a lack of information, right? So that's why we, are excited about what we do. We have the book, we do a lot of presentations, but we're actually launching a podcast next week on the 21st, just called Host Coach, and it is directed to KW agents around the subject of financial freedom through short-term rentals. And so all the content there will be answering, all the questions that you might have to get you enough confidence to go forward and, start investing or helping your clients.
Look at that, because this will be dropping next Wednesday. You're dropping next Tuesday. The two will tie together, right? So we'll make sure that everybody gets out and looks up Host Coach and listens to that, because I know I will be as well.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Culin. I appreciate it, buddy.
Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Dave.
Absolutely.
And until next time with Entrepreneurial Impact, your two hosts, Joe and Dave, and I appreciate y'all tuning in and give us a listen in and follow in on Spotify as well as Apple iPod.
Take care, everybody.